Well, hello everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Trauma Informed Church Kid podcast. This is going to be a live Q&R episode, and so I have been putting out requests for questions. I do have a couple that I'm going to be able to answer live here today, and then I'm also going to be able to um, answer some questions that are coming in through the chat, which is working, which is good. So now I know. Um, However, I did just want to let everybody know that I'm going to try to shoot for about an hour to an hour and a half on this. So if anyone wants to kind of time this out, that's kind of where how much time we're going to spend here today, just depending on how long it takes to get through questions and things like that. I did offer to everybody that if they wanted to submit a question, then every submission receives um, an entry into a drawing for a Bible project coffee table book. And unfortunately, of course, if I would be a lot cooler and a lot more organized, I would have it here with me to show live for you all to see it. I promise it does exist. I promise. I put up pictures of that in our Trauma from Church Kid podcast discussion group. So if you want to see pictures of that, you can see it there. But in any case, this is something that I've had for a while. I really enjoy it. I just have kind of not really had much of a use for it, and it's just so nice and so wonderful. I really wanted to give a chance for somebody else to be able to use it. So, as we go through today, I in the live chat, I will take a look at some of the questions that are submitted there, and if they are approved questions, which is just I'm sorry, kind of up to me, at my discretion, then they will count as an entry, and I will be able to put them up here for a question and see if you can go ahead and become be in the drawing for a special Bible Project coffee table book. So, um, my first question here. Oh, one other thing I forgot to mention is that after I get through the questions, I'm going to leave myself some time at the end to go over some podcast information. So I'm going to spend some time kind of giving a little bit of a retrospective on the first season so far and kind of what I've learned, what I feel like I did not not perfectly and what I'd like to do differently and how I think I could do better. So that way you could all get a sense of kind of where we're headed in season 2 and beyond. So I will spend some time on that uh, near the end of the video. So let me take a look here. So the first question that we have, this one comes from Amber, and Amber is the host of the When Deep Calls Deep um, YouTube channel. So she has a lot of really good content on there. I've collaborated with her on 2 different episodes on Leviticus, why Leviticus matters. So if any of you want to be able to go learn some more Hebrew Bible nerdery, she also collaborates with Courtney, and Courtney is someone who I've worked with as well on those Leviticus episodes, on the Hebrew Bible Breakdown, on the Faith Unaltered channel. So you can find Amber at any of those places, but you can also find her question here today, right now. So she asked this question: how does having a faulty experience with parents hijack or taint reading the patterns of broken images of father and mother imagery in Genesis? And that is absolutely a very, very excellent question. Um, and it certainly is true that that happens. So, one of the things that I say often in the podcast is that we become like what we worship. So, what that means is our view of God and the way that we interact with God becomes the way that we see the world. It kind of becomes our lenses through which we can be able to see other people, how we see ourselves, and how we see the whole world. So there definitely is a skewing effect that happens when whenever our kind of tradition has taught us certain things about God and what Him being a father looks like. For some people, that looks very demanding and very, um, what's the word I'm looking for here? Implacable. Has this sense of just like retributive justice that is unable to be moved by any pleas for mercy whatsoever. And not just unable, but like can't be moved, that he has to punish, or else he would not be just in some way. And that certainly becomes a way in which our view of fathers and fatherhood is skewed. There also are people, ways in which that perception gets skewed in the opposite direction. So, what that sometimes happens is, and I've seen this happen with some of my clients that I work with, where they have had experiences with their parents that then map onto in their minds into what exactly who God as a father is. It isn't as common for people to have that reaction about God as mother, partly because there isn't as much of a tradition that really emphasizes that, although there definitely is mother language all throughout, especially the prophets, regarding God. However, it still can be a thing where, so remember in the How I've Hurt episode, we talked about attachment. That is probably the primary lens that I think makes sense of the way in which this skewing effect happens. So, if you remember there are four kind of basic attachment styles. There's anxious, avoidant, disorganized, which is like a combination of both, and then secure. So if a person grows up around father figures or mother figures, just people whose job it is to keep us safe, to show love to us, to define love for us, to be the kind of people that we look up to and um, kind of become our image of God, in a sense. When those people define love in a particular way, either through their words or their actions, then that way in which love is defined for us becomes our kind of mental map of what attachment looks like. So when we then go out into the world and we start growing up and we become our own person and we learn more about, we get into relationships and things like that. What happens is we carry that mental model of attachment with us into those circumstances. And so what winds up happening there is that we have a situation that we really struggle to see God any other way than the way in which our mental maps of attachment figures, of love, of all those kinds of things, has taught us up to that point. And that becomes very, very difficult to overcome. And that's one of the reasons why I did that How I've Hurt episode focusing on attachment, because for me as a person, my kind of mental map and model of God was a particular way. And it became very, very difficult for me to overcome that, even though I had kind of like head knowledge of, well, I know this isn't really the way God is, or I know this isn't the way God's supposed to be, or supposed to be seen as, or something like that. Um, but what wound up happening is that even though I knew it in my head, it still had a disconnect with how I was feeling, in my heart. So that was something that really became very difficult for me to overcome. And I mean, here we are, how many years later? 40 some years later. And that was something that was very, very hard for me. Um, but yeah, those pictures of who our fathers and mothers are come to define who God is to us. A great example of this is like when we mess up, when we do something wrong, when we screw up in some way. How does God respond to us? Or sorry, how do our parents respond to us? Well, one of the ways that, like, let's say that a parent would be really angry. They would just be like, "What are you doing? Like, how could you do that? What is wrong with you?" Well, we tend to kind of create one of two mental maps in our head. One of those mental maps is one that says God is like that. That when we mess up, God gets really angry at us and screams at us, or has wrath that has to fall on us, or something like that. And that experience of being wrong, the way we solve that is by um, placating him, by appeasing him somehow, by giving him a gift or something that makes it all better in some way. Um, and that then becomes how we interact with God from that point forward. It also can become something about how we interact with our parents. And if it sounds like I'm bouncing back and forth between the reference, it's because I am. Like, that's kind of the way it works in real time. Our mental models of God affect our mental models of our parents, which affect our mental models of God, which affect our mental models of our parents, and so on and so forth. So this is definitely not like a one size fits all, input output kind of scenario. This is something that has an awful lot of complexity and subjectivity, so it's different for every person. But by and large, we can say pretty clearly that the way in which our experiences of attachment figures at an early age, um, that definitely gives us a sort of kind of mental model of how we interact with and experience God. So that is one thing I would say. And I'm going to take a quick look here because I'm just double checking to see if the event is happening. Um, there we go. Okay. All right. I don't know. It looks like it's working on Facebook, but nevertheless, okay. So let's just keep rolling with this. Well, thank you very much, Amber. I appreciate that. And so Amber in the chat is saying, she thought that was a fantastic answer. So thank you. You're welcome. um, I really like one of the things that Josh mentioned as well. When I was talking about that, he talked about how there are images of God like a mother hen, and that is true. Yeah, like one of the things that it says in the prophets very often is that God longs to collect Israel under His wing, or it says that like God bore Israel or birthed her or nursed at or compares himself to a nursing mother. Like if a mother with a child at her breast can forget, then I can forget. And of course, the implication, of course, is absolutely not. That's just not possible. So it definitely is something where there is both both mother and father imagery in the Bible for God. But that is absolutely something that we have to keep in mind and be aware of. And for me personally, just to kind of share a little bit of personal stuff, it's something I think about an awful lot because I see myself as being the the way in which my daughter will see God. Um, and I've had this happen before, where like I'm really short with her when it comes to putting her down for bed and doing the reading stuff. And we usually read some kind of Bible story or something like that at night. And we have like a kind of liturgical prayer that we say every night and those kind of things. And I always have to be really, really cautious because there are times where I'll just be really annoyed with how fast she's or not doing her shower, brushing her teeth, those kind of things. And I just want to go to bed, and I'm tired, and I get really short and snippy and yell and those kind of things. And then I say, okay, now let's read about Jesus. Like, that's just not something that I want to do. So I have to be really careful of those moments, and I try very hard to say when I do that, to say, okay, I'm sorry, this is not how I should have acted. I need your help too. Like, you've got to speed this up, but I also should be a lot more patient and willing to work with you, because I think that's going to reflect God to her a lot better than, angry, okay, now let's, do the thing we have to do and then bye-bye. Like that's definitely something that's in my head a lot. So, all right. I'm going to take a look at the second question. This one is also from Amber. So, her second question is, the first two words of Genesis can also be translated from the mind of or imagination of God. So, like, in the beginning, God, God created. But of course, in Hebrew, there's some changing of the order there. So, can be translated from the mind of or imagination of God. Would this be some of the origin of the intuitive response to beauty and the inclination to narrative as we are born, as inspired by the imaginer? Ooh, I really like this question just because um, that seems to connect a lot to what Dr. Patitsis and I talked about. So, for those of you who haven't seen it, I do have an episode where I do an interview with Dr. Timothy Patitsis called Beauty First Healing from Trauma. And that's something that I have started to implement in my counseling practice a lot with my clients because I do think that has become one of my favorite framing devices for understanding what healing from trauma looks like is both a kind of narrative approach that says, where are you situated in your own narrative? And is that it, what beauty is in that narrative? And what beauty has the trauma tried to eradicate from that narrative? And how can you either bring it back or put it back in or something like that? So I do that a lot. But I also talk with clients a lot about how valuable and healing encounters with beauty can be, such as, for example, like getting out into nature, being out among, um, well, I mean, the whole How of Her episode I did was came off of the heels of me doing a fall camping trip where I went up into the mountains and saw the aspens change. But it doesn't have to be something getting away, so to speak, that can be beautiful. It could just be simply, and I have this all the time, where just um, sitting with our children or our wives or our husbands, and just drinking in the beauty of life, because every single second we get is a gift from God, and not from a God who is stingy and who demands that we obey him in order to give good gifts, but a God who freely gives good gifts because he loves us, and that's kind of who he is. And so that's one of the things that I think is really, really valuable when we're talking about recovery from trauma and looking at how to heal. So to relate that kind of background information to Amber's question, from the mind of or imagination of God. Well, that's actually where beauty comes in, especially beauty in nature. So hang on a second, I'm going to sip my tea. So everything that we see in creation is from the mind of God, is out of the imagination of God. That's kind of what is meant by the traditional Christian doctrine of creation ex nihilo. Because, I mean, obviously, it's not like out of nothing, because nothing is not a thing. There's nowhere, no thing from which to take something out of to be creation out of nothing. So it doesn't mean that. What it means is more like there is nothing else outside of God that conditions God in his act of creation. So when God creates the world, when God created the world, which are both true, by the way, um, it comes from him. It's not something that he is compelled to do. It's not something that he must do. It's not, we don't have a Platonist God or an Aristotelian divine essence that just emanates the world out of it, out of necessity. Um, what we have is a person, a free person who freely chooses to create because he thinks that it is good to create something rather than nothing. And so, out of that will to create good things, he brought forth the world we have. Not the world we have right now, but the the world that he called very good. And of course, the world we have right now is part of our creation, and rather than God's creation. And so that is really important because I another thing I've talked about all season long on the podcast is synergy. That idea of like God and humans working together, two wills working together, of the will of created beings and the will of the uncreated will of God working together in tandem. And that really is the case with creation as well. Because part of us having the image of God and being the image of God, I should say, is that we have that ability. We have the dignity of being sub creators in God's creation. That's part of what ruling and subduing the vocation given to Adam and Eve was. It was about being the ones who can bring God's creation to its completion, to its full fulfillment, to its telos in Greek. And when we chose not to do that, then a whole, I don't want to say a whole other world, like it's a separate thing, but a whole other creation was introduced into God's good creation. And our creation is not good. And that's where we find ourselves in the situation we're in. And of course, the whole season has been all about the three falls. And that has been part of describing what that is. So when we encounter beauty, when we have experiences of beauty, one of the things C.S. Lewis says is that is, and I'm going to paraphrase here because I can't remember the exact quote, but it's something like experiences of beauty are the the other world breaking in to our world. And I really think that's true. So whenever we sit down and encounter a sunset, or whenever we put something together and it just feels right, and we feel confident, we feel proud, and we feel satisfied and happy, and and we see how it can help others, and and we feel connected to ourselves and to the world. Whenever those things happen, those are not those are not spiritually neutral. There is no divide between natural and supernatural. There is no such thing as like this sense of, okay, well, we're here and God's there, and God has to like crack the egg to like get in somehow. It's more like they're enmeshed. And I'm holding, for those of you who are on audio only, I'm holding my hands one in front of the other right now, and kind of in between the fingers. They There is an enmeshed reality there. So we act and God acts. A moment where we complete a task that we are very proud of, that feels very good, that is us and our energies, and also the energies of God. And that is part of the beauty that God created us to live for, to experience, to have in the garden, because of the world that He created being very good. And of course, that work becomes much harder now that we are in a mixed creation that is part ours and part God's. But when we have those moments of beauty, that is God's creation making itself known. And it and that's where I kind of resist C.S. Lewis's language of breaking in some way, because it does kind of create that sense of like two-tiered cosmos. Um, I would say it's more like the veil is being lifted in those moments. That when we react to something that is beautiful, and we feel that in our soul, in our heart, to kind of go with our anthropology episodes, when that happens, that is the veil being lifted, and we can be able to see what creation was supposed to be like, what we were supposed to be like. And very often that sense of awareness of that is very dimmed and very um, darkened because of the world that we live in that is our creation. And that's part of the flesh. Again, to go back to our anthropology episodes. So the reason why we have that intuitive response to beauty, no one has to sit down and teach you, okay, here's how to respond to beauty. We just do. And that's because we are the image of God. That's what it means to be human, is to be able to recognize, to have that inseparable connection, to be able to recognize what God is out there in the world. And so one of the things in the Eastern Orthodox tradition that they talk about a lot is how we all love God, even if we don't know that. And I absolutely think that's true. That we, as humans, we all love God. We just don't always call him that. We might love any number of other things that are beautiful to us, that attract us at that soul level. And we might not realize that that is a reflection or an icon of God, but it actually is an icon of God. So, one of the things that can help to kind of make this a little more practical is just simply like any human relationship that we have, like a husband and wife, for example. To I'm married, so coming up on 19 years now, next month. Um, so I'm married and I love my wife deeply. But and one of the things that can be really helpful for me is to remember that in loving her, I am loving God. Not that she is God. I don't want to, elevate her to that status, because that's exactly the problem. Is when I do that, that becomes idolatry. But the honor, the love, the reverence, the care, the veneration, the dedication, all the good things that I give her are an expression of my love for God. Because when I see beauty in her, and when I recognize and honor and give value to that beauty in her, then what happens is that honor passes on to what's called the prototype, to God Himself, because He is the one who created all things, including her. And so, by honoring her, I am honoring God. And when I give her, that recognition of her being an image of God, um, that is the best way to love her, without a doubt. That is what true love looks like, is when I see God in her, and then I aim myself toward that. So, of course, that's kind of like a good example, which I think is just connected to what Jesus said when He said, whatever you do for the least of these, you do for me. Like, this is not just like a way of talking or thinking about it. It's a way of making it real that whenever we actually encounter other people, we are in a real sense encountering God. Not the divine essence, not the fullness of God, not everything and everybody God is, or everything who God is, but we are actually seriously, really encountering God. Um, and that's one of the reasons why Jesus tells us to love our enemies, because even our enemies are icons of God. And that icon may be disfigured and marred almost beyond recognition, but it is still part of the gifts of God and who God is. So that's something we have to keep in mind. And that's exactly why I think we are intuitively drawn to that, because in our souls, despite everything that has happened to us in our fallen state, we still recognize the goodness of God. in other people and in all creation. So, um, let's see. Okay, I'm just looking through the chat here. Oh, Josh says to see unity and identity, to give unity and identity, and to be a unity and identity in creation. Yeah, and that's kind of what it means to be the image of God. Josh has a good question here. I'm gonna pose. Um, Amber, yes, Amber asked me. She says, "I have more questions." I was like, "Yes, Amber, bring them on. Give me more." But also, Josh asked one. This is Josh Davidson, by the way. Josh is a good friend of mine who is on the Faith Unaltered channel. He hosts the Cosmic Corner, which is something that I collaborate with him on. About well, at least it's the Cosmic Corner comes on once a month every on Fridays, and I've kind of been on there sporadically recently because of the podcast, but it's he's a good man. So let me go ahead and pop it back up. He says, "Is the world we have now good?" That is a very complicated question to answer. Here's why. Because the goodness of creation that God put in there is native to it. It can never be erased. Very much like the image of God that we are. That can never be lost without ceasing to be human. We will always be images of God. God's good creation will always be good simply because God made it and God only makes good things. So on that level, the answer is yes. There's another level though. Is are the is the experience. I would call this like the phenomenological or experiential level. Is the world we have now good? No, not at all. Um, we have, especially being a trauma counselor who sits and listens to people's stories of sexual abuse or of suicide or um, self harm or of any other forms of abuse, including spiritual abuse. There's nothing good about that. And that's why I'm going to reiterate what I said earlier. That is our creation, that is not God's creation. God does not create cancer. God has not created um, global warming. God has not created um, the choices of that person. Those are all our creation, and none of that is good. Having said that, though, God's project in creation is to bring good out of evil, to take what we have created and to find the tiny kernel of goodness that is His creation, and then to rip that out of our creation by force if necessary, by coaxing and gentle correction is always the first, second, third, fourth, and 10th option. And if that long suffering finally runs out, then it becomes the wrath. Then it becomes, I'm going to take this good kernel of goodness that you have perverted and I'm going to take it back. And when that happens, that becomes a wrenching, that becomes pain, that becomes judgment, that becomes wrath. But that is a very, very good thing because that is God reclaiming goodness for Himself. And that is the chance that we have to be able to respond to that and cooperate with that act of creating good out of evil. So, is the world we have now good? Not really. Certainly not our experience of it. Is it good because God created it? Absolutely. 100%. And that cannot be erased. So, So thank you, Josh. Um, Amber has another question. Give me a second after I take my sip. Okay. She says, how do you suggest that content creators bring some trauma awareness to their content without compromising their vision? Well, that's absolutely a the very thing I'm wrestling with. That is absolutely what I'm trying to figure out how to do. And I will actually connect that question back to some changes that I'm going to be making for season 2 in a little bit. But I would say that the biggest thing is just being, and I like that word trauma awareness, being trauma sensitive or trauma aware, in that realizing that simply going, okay, everybody, this is the truth. Get on board or have the train pass you by. That does not work. That is not something that is very healthy, is very helpful, or is something that is going to be valuable. So I think a person can still take a very definite stand on something and say, look, this is what I believe. This is where I've come from and what I've read and what I've learned. However, they have to be aware of how that can be received by others. And I don't think it's sufficient just to say, well, this is what I meant. So everybody else who misunderstood me, that's your problem. I really think it's incumbent on content creators, especially in the church worldview and the church sphere, to be really aware, not just simply of putting the truth out there, but of being aware of how it is going to affect other people and take that into consideration and handle that with grace and care and concern and acknowledgement. I mean, even if you go, look, honestly, I just disagree. I think you're wrong, and I think you're in the wrong, with this. They can still say, they can still say that, but they can do that in a gracious way. And they can do that in a way that brings unity and healing and wholeness rather than judgment and condemnation. So um, ultimately, it comes down to how do you bring um, love and compassion and uh, let your speech always be seasoned with grace as with salt, is what Paul says. Um, how do we bring that into this is what I believe and this is how I read the Bible? So that's a tough line sometimes and is something that I feel a lot. Like I honestly think that has some bearing on why my speech difficulties have kind of ramped up a little bit. Well, a lot since starting the podcast, is that I think the weight of the seriousness of that, of knowing just how much that really is a real thing and how I have to be careful of that and sensitive to everybody's stories, that causes some anxiety and that causes some weight. I say that just to be vulnerable, not to blame. I am still responsible for my choices and what I do, but um, it is something that I wrestle with and think an awful lot about. So, all right. So I'm going to go ahead and transition now into talking a little bit about the uh, the next phase, the next season. So let me pull this up here. By the way, if anyone wants to ask some questions, please feel free to shoot them in the chat in whatever platform you're using. because I will still be able to see them, and I will go ahead and address them if they pop in. But so let me just check one thing real quick. Ah, oh, okay. Amber has one more. I will get to that in a little bit, I promise. So, first of all, a couple of updates and things that will be a little bit different in season two. Um, One is that I have noticed as I've done this that when you have a YouTube channel, you kind of have to have some kind of video recording that goes with it. Um, and so I don't know if any of you know about the Nathan Jacobs podcast. I know Amber does, and I know Josh does, I know Courtney does, but anybody else knows about that. What he will do is he will just kind of record himself talking the episode, and then that audio is what gets uploaded to the podcast. Um, I'm gonna test that out next season. My hope, this, and I say test because God willing is always the case, and it may be the case that doing it with some sort of audio and video just won't work, and I just have to go back to audio. But whatever. Um, I'm going to try to record something like this, not live, but just on my own, and then edit that, and then post the video up on YouTube, and then post the audio on the other platforms like Spotify and like Apple and those kind of things. So part of what my summer break will be is learning more about how to do that. The other thing that I'm going to be doing a little bit more of next season is more trauma focused content. So, what that will look like is more expertise episodes, also more how I've hurt episodes, and fewer nerd alert episodes. And the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to start up a Substack that will kind of take the place of the nerd alert episodes. I don't want to say that I will never do one. That's almost certainly not true. But the kind of process of diving super deep and getting really nerdy, I really want to leave that into a different niche. And I'm still connected with the podcast, still connected with me, but not something that people who are in the podcast listening audience will receive. For one, that keeps my episodes shorter consistently, which is just nice for me and good for me, but it also kind of keeps the focus of what I'm trying to do a lot more narrow, and I think that's probably better in the long run. So very often you might see me do something where I will say in a podcast and say, okay, here's where I stand or what I believe about this, and see my Substack for more. Where there I can kind of unpack that in a lot more depth. Um, so those are the things that I think I've kind of settled on or agreed to. Now, there are some things that I am toying with that I haven't quite decided yet. One of those is the hosting platform. Right now, it's through Podbean. I'm not super thrilled with Podbean. um, and I don't know that I mean, that's not because it's a bad thing. I just don't know that it has all the functionality I want. So I may change the hosting platform. I hope that shouldn't have too much of a disruption in things. If it does, I will almost certainly try to fix that as soon as I can. So, um, the other thing that I'm uncertain of is frequency. So, those of you who started with me know that I began doing once a week, and then I had to kind of move to doing once every other week, partly because of the speech issues, and partly because of the just it's really hard to have a full time job and a part-time podcasting gig once a week. So I don't know yet which one I will do, whether I'll keep the every other week or go back to once a week. If I had to guess, I'd say I would probably keep once a week or once every other week and then add in supplemental throughout. Like I would rather under promise and over deliver rather than over promising and under delivering. Um, the other thing that I'm not quite sure about yet is whether or not I will start up any kind of Patreon or other subscriber feature. I don't really want to, but one of the things I have been considering is hiring a freelance editor for the episodes, which will help me with my time. It also helps with my tongue. It helps with a lot of things. If I do that, I will probably set up some kind of Patreon or subscriber system, not because I want to make any money. I really honestly almost kind of resist making money off of this and really don't want to. But I also realize there are financial realities that may come into play. So, something to keep an eye on for the future. So, um, let me take a look here. Something in the chat. Oh, okay. All right. Well, I appreciate that very much, Amber. Yes, we will talk. So, and Amber also says, "Aw, I love the nerd alert." Well, I do too. And frankly, that's one of the reasons why I think I want to step back from it on the podcast because I love it too much. I get too nerdy. I dive too deep, too fast, too far, and I really need to keep my focus where it should be on the content that's 30 minutes that will not hurt your head and that kind of thing. Now, again, does not mean that that depth will go away. It'll just be moved to a different platform, namely the Substack. So, um, Amber's question: how would you encourage people to use their right brain more when engaging with Scripture? So, for those of you who don't know, a right brain approach is more about how do you, well, it's the beauty question we talked about earlier. It's the right brain is the right hemisphere, and that is the one that is the primary source of things like intuition, creativity. It's the aspect of the brain that can see the whole rather than the parts. It's the part that's good at synthesizing and seeing patterns, those kinds of things. And I think doing the design patterns of like what Tim Mackey does, where you look and try to see, okay, here's this word, and how does this word connect in a through line throughout the whole Bible? That is a great way to do a more right brain study of Scripture, um, and to see the way in which the concept and the conceptual ideas continue throughout. That is a really good way to do that. Also, read your Bible while you're outside. Read it while you're listen to it while you're on a run or a bike ride. Um, Getting your whole brain engaged is always a good way to do that. Josh mentions something really important too: engaging with novelty and flow. Yes. hmm Although I would say that flow is more of like an integration of both hemispheres, of like left and right working together. But yes, yeah, it's a lot better because to activate the right brain in some way, anyway, rather than just simply left brain logic and language. So, but yeah, doing something different. is a great way to engage the right brain when you're doing Bible study. Um, Look up a different portion that you've never encountered before. Um, Read it in a different way. Read it in a different um, translation. When you encounter something that is um, not that doesn't make sense, instead of jumping right to judgment, go to curiosity, like genuine curiosity. What does this mean? I want to learn. I want to know. I wonder. That's all right brain activity. So, all right, to go back to some updates. Um, Hold on a second. So, I mentioned that I would be on the summer break, so to speak, and that I would be spending some time off. Now, I won't be totally off. I will be doing more of like the cutting more reels and shorts from the expertise episodes, like from Dr. Imes, from Nicholas Soellner, and maybe one or two more from Dr. Patitsis. And of course, another thing related to doing more of those is that I have to schedule them. So I have to email the their people and coordinate schedules, and that whole process takes time. So I kind of want to do that, take time off and do that rather than trying to like lay the tracks in front of the train as it's barreling down the hill. Um, you will probably see me re-promoting some old episodes on social media here and there. And that is probably going to be another thing I'll be doing a bit over the summer, as well as writing some new outlines and planning the upcoming season. And then I might do another live launch to kick off the season like we did last year. I don't know yet. Um, if it feels like it's worth it, then I'll do it. If not, never mind. But I'm targeting a return in September. So looking for once September begins, that's when season 2 will begin. Now, as to what content will be covered in season 2, I know I've talked about going through the whole Bible and going through it in order. However, I'm going to break that a little bit for season 2. I'm going to focus on Exodus and Leviticus in season 2. So we only got through 11 chapters in season 1. I promise you we will go a lot faster and a lot more high level rather than granular detail in season 2. So the reason why I wanted to do that is because, first of all, I wanted to directly connect the land promises that God gives to Abraham to the process of entering the land and taking inheritance of the land that comes at the end of the Exodus Leviticus narrative. So I wanted to kind of connect them in a more explicit way. And so that felt more natural to me conceptually. The other thing is that Exodus and Leviticus are more trauma focused. And that is one of the things I wanted to do next season. They have a lot more potential for areas that could uh, be difficult for people, and a lot more misconceptions and mistaken ideas that need reconstruction. Um, and so, like, if you ask people, like, where's the part of the Bible you have a problem with? They're much more likely to talk about these sacrifices in Leviticus than they are talking about, like, Abraham and Sarah, for example. Not saying that they won't. Obviously, that's all over the place, but there's a bit of a difference there that I see at least. And bluntly, if I'm just really honest, I know that um I know that I really enjoy. Um, I really enjoy Leviticus and sacrifice. And so, I mean, yes, there is a selfish part of me that just wants to talk about it. But again, like I said, I do think that this will be a valuable thing to do apart from just simply what Spencer wants to do. So, so we will in the Exodus and Leviticus, we'll start with a brief touchdown in the Abraham narrative to connect it back to last season in Genesis 1 through 11. Um, and then we will from there kind of time jump to the slavery in Egypt and the children of Abraham being in slavery in Egypt under Pharaoh. And we'll follow that narrative all the way through till Sinai. So that will include concepts about slavery and redemption, about God redeeming a people for his own possession. We'll talk about slavery in the ancient Near East. We'll talk about the plagues on Egypt and how their warfare with the gods of Egypt. We'll look at the parting of the Sea of Reeds and what that means. We'll look at Passover, look at the ideas of sacrifice and substitution that are, or rather are not there. We'll look at things like the death of the firstborn and how that is very difficult. We'll look at the Sinai narrative and the rebellions that happen on the way to Sinai, the covenant inauguration ceremony at the foot of Sinai, and then, of course, the golden calf incident that happens almost immediately thereafter. And then from there is where we'll kind of jump into Leviticus, looking at what is tabernacle worship? What is the difference between holy and common, between pure and impure? And you can bet we'll be talking about purity culture at that time. And then also looking at sacrifices and offerings. What are sacrifices? And what are offerings? And how do we conceptualize them? And then finally, we'll end with a big picture look at the law itself as a whole. Like, what is the law? What is its purpose? What is it done? Is it over? Is it all? Do we need to worry about it at all? Is that something that God gave a primitive people, and thankfully we know better now because we have Jesus, or is there something else going on? And also, in what way does the law relate to the fallen state of humanity? Is it supposed to fix that? If so, to what degree and in what way? And all those things. So that to me is going to be a very rich batch of possible episodes. I'm really looking forward to that. So, Amber, you have one more question. I'm going to go ahead and say, sorry, I won't be able to do that, partly because of the tongue, and partly because we've got a lot so far. Right? So I'll just go ahead and skip right to the let's see. Here we go. There we go. We will go ahead and skip right to the picking the winner of that Bible Project thing. So Amber had 4 questions. Josh had a 1, and I have my Google Sheets that has tracked everybody who has asked a question. So we will spin and see if we can get a number between 1 and 5, and we will see what happens. So there we see if I can make this bigger. There we go. All right, so here we go. Yay, number one. That aligns with Amber. So, congratulations, Amber. You have won the uh whatever you want to call that, the Bible Project coffee table book. So I will connect with you to figure out exactly how we're going to do that and what that will look like. There we go. Okay, I'm back now. And let me get rid of that. All right. So it looks like yeah, like I said, I will connect with you, Amber, to figure out how I can get that to you. And of course, that will be free of charge, just because this is something I enjoy um, giving away. So, all right. So, last thing that I want to say here at the end is just to say thank you to everybody. Obviously, like thank you to so many people, but specifically Josh, Amber, you guys are in the chat right now. Um, Courtney, who I've collaborated with, Phil Bray, who I've collaborated with. He has a great book out called Leviticus on the Butcher's Block. Please go look it up and find it at Whipfin Stock Publishers. Um, Josh Sherman, who I've collaborated with, all of my Cosmic Corner people that I have worked with. It's a joy and I love working with you all. And in general, I just want to say that I've really appreciated everybody who has listened to this podcast this season. Um, it hasn't always been easy to put it out or put together, but my hope is that it has been helpful for somebody. Um, I really, I mean, I got this started because I really wanted to help people to see the beauty of God that I see. And I realize how difficult that can be for so many people. And so if that's you, first of all, you're welcome here. And that's okay that you don't see it. Um, and I'm not going to force you to. And I'm not going to shame you for not. Because I see why it can be almost invisible. But my hope is to create a place where we can carefully and cautiously and sensitively walk together through the revelation that God has given us and hopefully understand that in a little bit different light and be able to see God in a little bit different way. Now, there have been some of you that have already connected with me over social media and said, thank you. Like, this is really helpful. And I can't believe no one told me this and I didn't see God differently. And that means the world to me. It means that what I'm doing has some effect. But I do want to say that this is not about me at all. This is about God's work and hopefully with God's help, his work. I mean, I pray very often, very regularly for this podcast and for the people who listen and for my clients because I know that I cannot fix things on my own. It takes me, it takes God, it takes you, it takes all of us working together to bring healing. And so that's really what I want to do. And I hope that this podcast can be that for you. So until September of 2025, I look forward to seeing you all then and hopefully some more people. And at that time, we will launch season 2. Thank you so much to everybody who has been listening and who will continue to. And I would continue to pray the same thing that I do at the end of every episode, that my prayer is that you will learn everything that God has for you. That no matter what your story, no matter where you've come from, no matter what things have happened to you, that you will encounter the love of God, which has changed my life and changed the lives of so many people. And my hope is that you will be able to encounter everything that God has, which is all good things. So, thank you very much.